Vince in the house. Oh, Susan, welcome. Brevard Portraits. Oh, hey, how's it going, Mary's on? Only one B, Rocka. Nice. Good to see you guys. Beardless, I know. Good call, Vince. It feels very strange. I still don't recognize myself. Hey, Megan Zepp, all the way from East Coast. Awesome to have you. Hope Mason's with you. For those of you who are on, Megan is a good friend from college. She is married to my best college friend, Jeffrey Zepp, and they have an amazing son named Mason who's already learning how to break ankles playing basketball. Susan, that's right. Oh, that's okay if you can't stay long. Thanks for joining. We're going to give everyone, yeah, Mary, good to see you. I figured that out as I was initially looking at Brevard Portraits. We'll give everyone a couple minutes, and then we're going to kick this off right at 11. I appreciate your time today. Let's get that set up. It's exciting times talking about emotional intelligence. My personal favorite topic, I'd say mindset and emotional intelligence, but they go hand in hand. So, Chris Frazier, all the way from Los Angeles. Welcome. Hope everybody is doing extremely well today. What's up, Chris? I have to tell you, I had a morning with Tony Robbins. Some of you may already be on. He's doing a Make Your Comeback free webinar series, 7 days. Today was day 2, about an hour in the morning. If you want to attend, just go to www.makeyourcomeback.com. I believe that's it. It's Tony Robbins. But I'm pretty fired up today. He always gets me fired up. Oh, nice, Chris. Preach EQ. Yeah, 100%. It impacts. There she is. Seriously. Nice. Captain Chris McIntyre is in the house. Is that? Oh, Marmar, good to see you. About one more minute, everyone, and then we will get started. I have been learning how to stick images into live. So we'll do that a few times. Philip Saunders, all the way from Virginia. Basketball star, Diaper Dandies member. If you see Flip 3133, he and I were teammates in AAU basketball our whole childhood and remain good friends to this day. It's great to have you, man. Mar, good to see you. What's up, my man? All right, let's go 30 more seconds, and then we will get into it. Is that Mickey? Yeah. Hey, Dell, welcome back. Sydney, yes. Sydney is one of my favorite children in the world. Daughter of Vince and Shalia Sullivan. Queen of Scorpions. Hey, Dale. Brevard Portraits, everyone, if you see that, that is Mary. She and I met at a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within conference about a year ago and have stayed friends over Facebook, so it's great to see you. And let's get going, everybody. 11:01, I want to be respectful of your time. We've got an hour here. I'll try to leave a little bit of time for questions. If you have anything that pops up, please feel free to write it into the box. I'm going to try and monitor that as we go. I'm also going to try and look you right in the eye, so if I happen to miss a comment, I will try to revisit that or just feel free to throw it back in there twice. We are talking about emotional intelligence today, and I like to start off every training with a current event that illustrates what we're going to be talking about this day. And this actually happened yesterday. I was talking with a friend. She's been furloughed from her job, and she wanted to go attend a training. And I guess according to do this training, you needed a discount code. And her organization is one of the members that allows these discounts. So she called the HR department and just asked for the discount code. And I guess the person on the other end of the phone basically wouldn't give the discount code and said, you need to contact someone else to get it. And she said, why? I just I just want to take this class. Like I'm trying to better myself during this period. And she said, you're furloughed. And she said, you know what your problem is? And then she went into, she thought this person should just be relaxing and enjoying their time off. And it just hit me. I thought, has any situation ever improved by starting with, you know what your problem is? But as we know, the challenge is, and if we were to pause the situation, pull everybody out for 10 seconds, 20 seconds and ask, hey, is this a great way to approach it? People would probably be aware that that's not the best way. Challenge is in the moment, right? Real-time assessment of what's going through our minds and our bodies. It is very difficult to be aware of all that and then choose the right decision, the right behavior, the right thought. Our feelings are the first thing that our brain interprets when anything comes into our world, right? It shoots through whatever synapse we pick it up on. It comes up our spinal cord and hits our limbic system. That's right at the top of your brain. And inside the limbic system is where your brain attaches emotion to whatever has occurred. And then it slowly proceeds to your frontal lobe or your neocortex. And that's where we attach ration and logic. And so what I have just said, right, means we are wired incorrectly as humans to respond with ration and logic. We are actually wired to respond emotionally. And not to get too deep into it, but the reason for that is we were wired to survive threats. You go back to caveman days, you imagine you're sitting in your cave and a tiger steps its paw in front of your cave. We would love to see our bodies all of a sudden become bigger and stronger, and we attack this tiger and we save our family. And then later, when we get to ration and logic, someone says, that was probably foolish. And you say, I saved the family. Challenge with today is we don't have those same threats. And that tiger paw, I'd like to use that image because that's the same thing as somebody coming up now and just saying something that we don't like or that throws us off. And especially in today's times, people are spending more time with and closer time to every single person around them. And I'm sure everybody's experiencing this in conversation, and I know I felt it too. It's just frustration and tension arises much quicker because we don't have that away time. And if we don't have systems in place to start to manage ourselves through that tension, the fear is, right, we can respond incorrectly one time, even just one time, and potentially break a relationship forever. And a lot of times I think we go, in that moment, that wasn't who I really was. So I'm going to go and apologize and say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. But the scary thing is, and I think everybody's aware of this, is that people, I know I do this, people often assume that what you said in that moment of tension is what your true feelings are. And I used to believe that. If somebody I was dating said something and it was painful and I said, well, that's what you really meant. Understanding the brain science now, I look at it totally differently, right? That person was probably processing with full emotion and hasn't gotten to that rational thought. And so a big part of emotional intelligence is it's understanding ourselves, right? We're going to label that element self-awareness and knowing everything that makes us tick. Right? What are our core values and why? Are we aware if something rubs against those core values, why we might all of a sudden move into this heightened anger, frustration? It starts with that base awareness. Do we know what those triggers are? Do we know what our strengths and our weaknesses are? Do we know what motivates us? I think that's one of the most interesting questions, even to ask at work. What motivates you at work? And what I find is that that's a hard question to answer unless we've done some of that work. We're going to get into self-management, right? Well, once we become aware of these emotions and it's rising up, we have the power of choice in that moment. We can decide what do we want to do next. And this, if you take nothing else from today, just take this simple question for yourself. What would create the behavior change that I'm looking for? Right? We're constantly interacting with other people and we're trying to, in some way, create a behavior from that person, whether it's a child, a significant other. And what I find is the greatest person who's illustrating emotional intelligence for themselves understands that how I say this will ultimately lead to a result. And it can be a great result or it can be a negative result. And then you tie that into just understanding other people. So we're going to call that social awareness, right? We're using Daniel Goleman. He was the psychologist who created the term emotional intelligence. Early 1990s is when this first came out. All the research that we read about today says your ability to succeed in your career and in your life is much closer related to your EQ, your emotional quotient, than your IQ. And as I've heard numerous times, people say, you get your job based on your IQ, right? What did I show on my resume? How did I perform in that interview? Every job after that first job, you get based on your EQ. And there's a very simple way to illustrate this. I want you to imagine you left your role right now and you started your own company. Who that you know of right now that you work with, would you take to your new company and put them on your payroll and have them as a representation of yourself and your company? Just take 10 seconds and think about that. Who do you bring over with you? Nice. Oh, I'm seeing some new names. Hey, welcome everybody joining. Changes Fitness. You guys need some fitness. Check out his Instagram account. He's a beast. Naomi, Lisa. All right, everyone. So you've probably identified a person or two. Now I'd like you to think about what characteristic trait is it that they have that makes you want to bring them with you. And, I've been doing 15 years of emotional intelligence training. When I was a corporate trainer for Starwood, I used to do new hotel openings, travel North America. I would put every single leader through a 4-day emotional intelligence training. It had various aspects of understanding brand, voice, all this, but it was all emotional intelligence based. And I've asked this question to, oh my gosh, I don't know how many people. And usually I'll hear things like they're trustworthy, they work hard, they have a great attitude. They're consistent. I know who they are every day. They support, they're loyal. They support me. On occasion, you'll hear they're very competent in their role. They're very intelligent. But for the most part, all the characteristics that we really value and that we want to bring with us in any new role that we take on are emotional intelligence based, right? Not intelligence based. And so that's the power of it, right? The psychologist will tell you that you have a capacity for intellect, for IQ. There is no capacity for EQ. These are skills that everybody can learn. And when we master them, right, we start to build on our fourth element of emotional intelligence, building great relationships. And you can look at every single relationship in your life and probably go back and assess if it's gone wrong, where has it gone wrong? And if it's continued to be great, what are the conversations we've had to understand each other better, to understand ourselves better, and to make sure, and this is the magic of it, self-awareness, which I believe is the hardest of the four elements. I only have great self-awareness is if what I think I'm putting out to somebody else is what they're getting, right? And a lot of times, you chat with someone and you say, hey, I'll give you a great example. When I coach people, I'm often doing a 360-degree assessment. And initially, I'll get to meet whatever leader this is, and I'll talk with them. How are things going? How's the team? How are your interactions with the team? How's the support? All those aspects. And then a lot of times, what you hear is a lot of positivity, great things. And then you get a 360 back, and you start to see a big discrepancy in what the team is saying about this person versus what they're saying about themselves. And what that typically means is it's just I haven't paid attention enough to realize what I'm giving out and how it's being received. And this is unfair. And I'll tell you why it's unfair, and everybody knows this. If you have trouble or if you're frustrated with someone that you work with or maybe someone that you live with, do you always go and tell them? And what we know is not typically, right? I can tell you from working, Starwood Hotels was my last role. I was working with the 4 hotels there overseeing training. And the number of times I'd have a room where I would be working with a frontline team and they would go, hey, our leader doesn't do this, they don't do this, they don't do this. And I would say, okay, have you ever brought this up with them? We don't get our schedule out on time. They don't listen to us. Have you ever brought this up with them? No, of course not. And so this is the challenge, right? This is the ultimate puzzle of emotional intelligence, is that we're meant to understand and interpret and pick things up, but people don't always tell us. So here's the deal, right? We're leading up to it. I'm going to try to stick an image in here. So, but I follow a guy on Instagram who I really like. His name's Don Depani, and he had this to say: emotions are a powerful tool. Controlled and directed, they can manifest amazing things. Uncontrolled, they can wreak havoc on your life. And I believe everybody's aware of this. We all realize, if I'm not aware and it kind of goes and it takes over me, I will do things, say things that I don't mean and that I never meant to say. And that's scary. And so, all right, we've got the setup, guys. We understand the importance of it. We're now going to get into it. I just wanted to throw one more thing out for those of you. I believe I know everybody on here, but my name is Campbell. My information is here. I'm a big believer in educations and systems and developing ourselves, and this is one of the greatest times that we have to educate ourselves. It is very easy to take this COVID time and just go, you know what, woe is me, this is awful, this is going to ruin me. Let's label that victim mentality, which we're all aware of, and I'm not saying you don't need to have those periods of time, right, where you go through those emotions. But the power of the intelligence of it, right, is saying I have the power within me to shift my thoughts and shift my thinking and start to tell myself a different story. And stepping out of that victim mentality, or maybe it's a critic mentality. You know, I know for me, the first couple of weeks going through this, I was like, man, COVID just hit at exactly the wrong time. I was so excited about 2020 launching, a couple different programs for Akamai training and consulting, and it hit, and all my work stopped, and I was just like, this sucks. This is unfair. And I went through the emotional cycle, right? We're not gonna dive into the stages of grief that people go through. But just a quick, we go through this denial stage, we get into anger, we try to bargain our way out of it, we go into a bit of a depression, it's not gonna change, I've gotta deal with this, and then ultimately get to acceptance. And that's a valuable cycle or stages to go through. But the power is the awareness of yourself, of what's the story I'm telling myself. And I have the ability to shift that story. And it's all emotional based, right? Our feelings determine our thoughts determine our beliefs. So if we want to change our whole system, we have to go back to the beginning of the feelings that we're having. And one of my favorite ways to thinking about this, and this is in particular is important for people dealing with trauma, which actually right now, I think everybody is dealing with some level of trauma. And what that might mean is we think about it all day. We go to bed that night thinking, oh my gosh, woe is me, I don't have this, or this has been taken from me. Probably don't sleep as well as we could. The next morning we wake up, and oftentimes we're thinking those same thoughts. And as a psychologist I follow and I love, Joe Dispenza says that by definition means you are living in the past. And so if you know me, one of my core beliefs is every day we wake up, we have the power to create what we want in life. And it's about taking tiny, small, tangible steps that over time will lead to massive change. And I was talking with a friend, and he had a great point. He's like, everyone is looking for the home run right now. Like, what can I, how can I change my entire being and walk out of COVID-19 going, I'm this new person and I'm incredibly marketable and all those things. And if you have that's great. I think that's hard to identify. So what's the small, tiny step that you could take right now? And we're gonna get into some different things today that you can use. If you want to continue on and dive deeper into this, as I mentioned at the top of this, I'm running a Excelling with Emotional Intelligence intensive program. This is a program I do for organizations. I've never done it virtually, and I'm gonna be rolling it out starting June 30th. It's gonna be consecutive Tuesdays, 10 to 12 a.m. I would love for you all to join. The class size is capped at 20, so we've got space for about 10 more right now. I'd love to see you in that. But let's go ahead and get started, everybody, and get into this. Really quickly, I just want you to think about that time when you were a child and go back to that childlike state and think about for a minute how you approached your world. New person walks into your world that doesn't look like you, that has a different skin color and doesn't talk like you. Do you have fear and judgment and trepidation? Or do you have excitement and eagerness and let me learn about this person and meet them? And, I hope one day to have my own children. I know we got Dell on here who's newly pregnant. Those of you with kids, you get to see this every single day. It is beautiful to just watch two kids meet. They walk up to each other and they go, hey, I'm Corey, I'm Charisse, want to play? And at some stage, right, then we learn judgment. We learn fear. And I've been trying to educate myself more than ever before. And, if you know my story, I feel like I have fought racism my whole life. And I've realized through this that I have done absolutely nothing. I've never truly educated myself on the systemic racism. Going back, the 13th Amendment, I never understood the ramifications of saying we've abolished slavery, but only if you're not a criminal. And there are so many elements, right, of understanding where judgment came from. And so let's enter that childlike stage for the next hour, and we're really gonna dive into approaching life differently without fear and without judgment. And I just wanted to show you really quick. I'm going to put up the image. Again, why is this so important? Because it's nearly impossible not to process life without fear or judgment, because instantly, whenever we interpret anything, it goes through limbic system, emotional response attached. Everybody's familiar with fight or flight response. That is managed by your amygdala, which lives inside of the limbic system. And so just by seeing the image here, you can see the only way to truly increase your emotional intelligence is, no matter what happens, from stimulus to response, to respect that space in the middle before you respond and say, I'm going to give my brain time to think differently, to process differently. And that is the origins of great emotional intelligence. How do we know it works? Well, our psychologists will tell you your brains have something called neuroplasticity, right? Which is simply this idea that our brains are continually developing and growing. The idea that you can't teach old dogs new tricks is completely false in this sense, right? We have gray matter that we're constantly shifting. So powerful, we can learn it. It's important to understand, like, what's the purpose of emotions? They are our greatest evolutionary tool, right? They give you directions. They teach you feelings, things before you're consciously aware. Your body is telling you, this is either rubbing me the wrong way, or maybe it's a great emotion. It's interesting. Whenever I've done emotional intelligence training, we spend most of the time focusing on, frustration, anger, right? Because that gets us into trouble. But happiness, right? Extreme happiness is another emotion that we probably need to manage as well. I remember one time in my life, I was having an amazing day. I'd gotten a promotion from when I was a guest services manager at Sheridan Waikiki into the learning and development manager at Royal. And I did not have much money. I walked into this bar. I just got my promotion. I said, drinks on me, everybody. And then I got the bill later, and I'll never forget that. I was like, that was probably not the best thing I could have done right in that moment, but it was great. But our emotions are sending us a message. And the danger is your emotions are not always sending you the accurate message. In that moment, we might feel something, we might respond to something, and then realize later, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't done that. And so as we pull it back, the power of choice is instrumental in every single thing we do, and never handing away choice to anyone else, right? People will try to take choice from you. It could be as simple. I don't know if anybody else gets this. I always notice when I'm in the grocery store, I'll just be walking down the aisle with my cart, and someone will turn their cart, and it'll happen to kind of get in right into my path. And in that moment, and I actually believe this, I think I'm wired very intensely. Like, I have instant reactions. My body, just the emotions trigger right away. And that's why, understanding my own EQ has been a lifelong journey for me, and it continues to be, because I don't think you change that initial response. Sometimes people go, okay, so we can learn how to not have the same frustration that we have. I don't think that's accurate. It will always be there. What we can change is our response to that, and understanding the power of our response. And so as we boil it into a definition, what does emotional intelligence stand for? There's a great book called EQ Edge that I got this from. This is a great definition: a set of emotional and social skills that influence the way we perceive and express ourselves, right? Everything that's happening inside ourselves and how we use that to communicate, to intake information. If you're familiar with blind spots, every single one of us has blind spots. We don't even see the entire world the way that it is, right? We pick up on information that supports what we tend to believe, right? The scientific term for it is your RAS, your reticular activating system. That's a network of neurons that filters out information that doesn't line up with your beliefs. So if you've told yourself that someone you work with is lazy and doesn't work hard, when they are working hard, it's possible that your brain will actually filter that out and you won't see it. And when they're not, you will highlight that and focus in on it. So it's how we take in information. It's how we develop and maintain social relationships, right? The power of it, of course, is understanding ourselves in order to build better relationships. We all know we are creatures of connection. We strive for connection and we need it. And in these COVID times, right, how we build those relationships is more important than ever before, because if you have tension in a relationship at home, and then you've got all these other elements happening outside, it is really tough to stay in the right mindset. So ideally, right, we control ourselves, build these great relationships, communicate in great ways, and then you see that next part, cope with challenges. A challenge doesn't have to be anything that brings you down. Through our challenges, we have the greatest opportunity for expansion and growth, right? Problems, we have the power to look at problems and go, great, fantastic. I am dealing with a problem right now. This is going to push me outside my comfort zone. And if I approach it the right way, I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow, I'm going to develop. And the easy way to think about that, think about a problem in your past, right? Something that you may have initially thought, this is awful, this is, how am I going to get through this? If you're sitting here today, you've gotten through that. So we have that power. It's all in our approach. And lastly, using emotional information in an effective and meaningful way, right? This is challenging. How do I process all this information? As Dr. Daniel Goleman said, out of control emotions make smart people stupid. I really believe that. So for the next 40 minutes, everyone, I want you to imagine this. This is just a fun way to process emotional intelligence. You are sitting at the doctor's office. This is not your traditional doctor. This is your own personal emotional intelligence doctor. And they're going to ask you certain questions to see, hey, does this hurt? Does this hurt? It'll look like, hey, are you doing this? Or are you not doing this? And then we'll talk about some ways to enhance those. And if you're interested in joining the intensive program next week, what we're going to be doing is just diving deeper and deeper into each of these and giving everyone time to process and build a very step-by-step cohesive plan for each of the 4 elements of emotional intelligence, so that you walk away with an action plan going, here's the little steps that I'm going to take to have that compound effect, right? To really increase and benefit and know myself better, manage myself better, understand the relationships around me, and tie that all into great relationships. There's a lot of research out there, right, that shows the importance of emotional intelligence. I wanted to just quote one study. It's from a guy named Cole Reiser. They studied over 1,000 executives at the top, and what they found is the executives that thrived were the ones that stay cool and calm in times of crisis. And here's why, everyone. Here's another power takeaway of just the concept. Emotions are contagious. What we walk into a room with, we typically will get back. Right? They wrote the book The Secret on this concept. What you give out is typically what you get back. And if you feel at times that people don't approach you the way that you'd like, great place to start is, what is it that I'm giving out? When you walk in with energy, with optimism, and by the way, I'm not saying that has to be the case at all times. Right, but I'll give you and I'm going to share a lot of my own personal thoughts on emotional intelligence. This doesn't mean they're right. It just doesn't mean they work for everyone. But here's a great example. If I'm in a place where I'm supposed to be at a networking function, and I don't feel like I'm in an emotional state to be able to be myself, the Corey Campbell that I have committed to the world. For me personally, I will not go to that function because I will realize I'm going to send mixed messages of who I am. I really believe part of the analysis and the awareness is then saying, this is who I commit to be in the world, and this is who I'm going to be every single day. I think consistency is really, really important. And you have those close relationships where you can let them into the pain. But on the superficial level, right, what we put out is what we get back, and that's a great place to start. Emotions are contagious. How do we manage and control those emotions and do them the right way? Oftentimes the reason people's jobs fail is that they didn't manage themselves the right way under times of stress. If the world had no stress, we'd be wonderful, right? It'd be easy to manage our emotions. There are 4 key elements. I've mentioned all these. I just want to show you the image here. We're going to cover each of these moving forward. Self-awareness, right? Our ability to understand exactly what's going through us. The guys who wrote Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Bradbury and Greaves, they did a study and they found only 36% of people can accurately identify the emotion they're having when they're having it. I thought that was untrue. And then when I was a psychology student at Virginia Tech, I remember as a junior, we had to do a dream journal. We had to carry an emotional journal. We had to carry it around, and every 30 minutes, we had to write down, your watch would chime, you'd write down the emotion you were having when you have it. And I remember I always thought, like, I'm pretty balanced, And when I did that journal, 30 minutes it hits and you're like, oh, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling tense. 30 minutes it hits, you're like, oh, I'm feeling pretty positive, I'm feeling good. My emotions when I look back were a roller coaster. And to this day, I always think, what if you happened to catch me at that one time I was in the trough? So self-awareness, understanding all that stuff's going on. Triggers, commas, motivators, strengths, weaknesses. Moving into self-management, right? You see the Hulk image. That's because when as the cartoon and the movie portray, once we hit a certain level, right, where we go red or he turns green, we no longer have conscious control of our bodies and what we say. And that's extremely dangerous. And I think the Hulk effect is actually very realistic in real life. You see social awareness there, right? So that's that ability to manage your emotions and choose the right decision each time. Social awareness moving into the external of understanding other people and what makes them tick. The image you see there, right, is the world's tallest man meeting the world's shortest man in 2014. Guinness Book of World Records brought them together. I always like to ask people, if you met either of them, would you have questions for them? And everyone goes, yeah, of course. Like, what's it like? What challenges do you face? How do people treat you? What judgments do people make of you? When you meet people in your regular everyday life, do you have the same questions? And I know that I don't, but I should. Imagine we asked all those questions of people, how well we might understand them and how well we might not move into judgment when maybe something they do or say doesn't line up with who they think they are. And then the last one, of course, is relationship management, tying it all together. So that's what we're heading into, everybody. I'm going to give you little tips and tactics for each one. But first, as we do, I just want to pull up the emotions slide. It is very easy when people ask you how you're doing to say, I'm good, I'm okay, I'm not feeling great. I went through a 7-day retreat that was built upon Bob Hoffman. He's a famous psychologist. His strategy, it's called the Hoffman process. And one of the things that we did for 7 days was really practice the actual emotion, like naming the emotion that we were having. And as you see on this list, from aggravated to disgruntled to disturbed to dissatisfied, grouchy, depleted, delighted. I mean, there are so many different emotions. And it truly is difficult to label each of those emotions in the moment and what we're having. But if we don't do that, we run the risk, right? Like, I want you to imagine your body as kind of like a bus, a vehicle, right? And somebody is driving that bus at all times. I often reference Inside Out, great movie from Disney, which illustrates this really well. Inside this 13-year-old girl, Riley's head, she's got 5 emotions, from anger to joy to fear to disgust to sadness. And as the cool part of that movie, if you haven't seen that movie, please check it out. If you have kids, do that as well. But the neat part about that movie was they started off with over 60 emotions, and then they pared it all the way down to 5 so people could understand it. But just think about your body as a bus and who's driving your bus at all times. And if you are feeding off emotion, there could be a very dangerous emotion driving your body, leading you right to thoughts, behaviors, actions that you wish you weren't having. And so that's all self-awareness. So self-awareness, guys. So quick few questions to ask yourself for self-awareness. Do you have a method every morning for assessing who I am today? What are the stresses I have on my mind? What's happening in here? It's critical to have some sort of method in the morning to just discover for yourself where you are. Another question to ask yourself, what types of situations trigger a response from you? Do you know your pet peeves? The danger of a pet peeve, as everybody knows, is it can fire you from 0 to 100. And I'll give you, I have numerous pet peeves when I drive. I can't get rid of them. I try very hard, but I have the same emotional response. And nowadays, I remember one day in my past when I was in high school, somebody cut me off, flipped me off, and I remember following them for a little bit of time. Nothing ever happened. But now you look at what potentially can happen even in that situation, right? You don't know who you're following. You don't know what emotional state they're in. You don't know what's happened to them that day. And those questions, right? Understanding that trigger for me is the key to then being able to manage differently. Now, when that happens for me, I actually try to run myself through that process in my head of like, wow, wonder what's going on in their world, like why they're in such a rush, because we've all been in that place ourselves where we cut somebody off and we thought it was justified. And that's an easy way to start to manage around that. But it starts with understanding the power of that trigger for yourself. And everybody's got entirely different ones. And then are you aware of what your actions and statements and how you communicate? Are you aware of what they do to others? Those are great self-awareness questions. So I want to talk a little bit about ways to enhance. We're going to go over these quickly. But again, these are some of the aspects we'll be diving deep into. First, if you want to increase self-awareness, it just takes time and it takes intention. And, we all know the term mindfulness, but mindfulness is about accessing and understanding and interpreting the thoughts that you have. So knowing your core values, that's one of the greatest activities anybody can do, is just trying to determine what are the values that I stand for so strongly that if someone were to go against these values, it could send me into a different place. Knowing your strengths and weaknesses is really important, because if we put ourselves in a place of our strengths, we can thrive. If we put ourselves in a place of weakness, right, we can run into a lot of trouble. And that happens more often than you'd think. For example, people who hate their job. And then you go, well, if you hate this job so much and it causes you frustration, it's impacting your relationships at home, why do you keep doing it? And a lot of times that person just goes, I don't know, it's what I've done my whole life. I can't get away from it. Tony Robbins has a term, your emotional home. You just return into this emotional state that you feel comfortable with, but that doesn't mean it's a healthy state for you. Understanding, right, triggers, patterns is another really big one we'll be diving deep into in the intensive program. Your patterns, right, and the things that you have relied on your entire life, they may be benefiting you, they may be hurting you. Ultimately, it's about awareness and deciding, if this pattern doesn't benefit me anymore, how do I make change, radical change, to move beyond that pattern? And that's not easy, but there are ways to get through that. Some other key areas to enhance your self-awareness: setting that morning ritual. As I mentioned, your self-assessment. Quick, easy way to do this, even if you listen to music, maybe you're on the way to work or just getting ready, just try turning the music off and sitting in silence for a couple minutes. The amount of awareness, for me anyway, that increases is crazy. I always notice I have all these things going on in my mind. Another one that's really important, understanding your physiological response to frustration, stress, pressure, what happens in your body. This is really cool. Before you may be consciously aware that something somebody's done is causing you some tension, your body will tell you, right? That's your emotions. And for me, I have no idea why, my feet clench. If somebody does something that, I remember it wasn't that long ago, right? We were walking into bars, and I remember I walked in with Charisse, and somebody gave me this kind of weird look, kind of like, and I remember like my feet just went nuts and my body tensed up, and that was an awareness thing where I was like, whoa, what is happening? And now I have power of responding differently, but everyone's different. You might get sweaty forehead, you might have clenched fist, you might have increased rate of breath. You might have an increased heart rate. You might feel heat on the back of your neck. That's the greatest signal, once you've identified yours, to be able to manage better. And then the last one, of course, is I got to do a personal 360. I need to know if what I'm putting out is what I think people are receiving. And I found if you walk up to anyone and say, hey, am I a good friend? Am I a good husband, wife, whatever it is? I find most people will just go, yeah, you're cool, right? Because it is hard to give feedback in that moment. If you give it a model, I have found it's much easier to provide feedback as well as I think people give it to you. And so Start, Stop, Continue is a great model. I learned about that in a book called Play to Win by two authors, Wilson and Wilson. It looks very simple. And I actually, guys, this may sound funny, but I have a couple good circles of friends. And with both of those groups, we do this. We'll have beers maybe once a month. Now it's a lot less often, and we'll sit down and we'll be like, hey, let's do some feedback, and tell me. So here's how it works. Tell me something I'm doing that drives you crazy that I should stop. Tell me something I'm doing that you love that I should continue, and tell me something I'm not doing that you wish I would start. And one of the most powerful ones I've ever received in my life was a friend who said, I wish you would start responding to my text the day I send it. And true story, I was like, I do. And he goes, no, you don't. And we went back and looked, and this is a bad way to receive feedback, but I was like, no, I think I do. Ultimately, right, a better way to receive feedback is just to accept it and think about it and see what you can apply. But we went back and looked, and he was exactly right. And I would have had no idea unless he had the courage to tell me and step back from that, unless we created an environment where he could provide that feedback for me. Right? And I was able to do that for him. If you are in a relationship, new or married for 30 plus years, this is a great activity to do with a significant other. Every so often, just say, hey, let's do Start, Stop, Continue. You just need a medium to explain things. So that's a quick overview of just social awareness, ways to enhance it. As we now shift into that self-management area, again, think about this. Once you lose control, has that ever benefited you? And I'm inclined to believe that has never, ever benefited anyone. In particular, if you have children and you lose control and you say something to that child, this is a really sad thing about life. I do some work with kids in a program called After School All-Stars. I haven't seen them in a long time, actually, but I used to get to see them, since COVID hit, but I've used to see kids more often. And a lot of times kids will say something just in the everyday life, like, oh yeah, my mom doesn't like me, my dad hates me. And I used to always ask, this goes back, I taught English in Japan for years, and kids there would say it. And I would say, why do you say that? And oftentimes a kid goes, oh, they told me. My dad was super angry the other day and just said, I effing hate you. And, I really fundamentally believe this. If we went and asked that parent, hey, did you say that to your child? They probably would go, no, of course not. They probably don't remember, because in that moment they were just feeding off emotion. So guys, we're going to try and get away from that whole response of emotion and be able to manage ourselves the right way. And that's the foundations of self-management. So here's some questions. Imagine you're back in the doctor's office. They're trying to figure out how healthy are you in self-management. First off, when you are tense, right? When you are frustrated and angry, do you respond? Do you feel like in that moment, I'm going to say what I got to say right now? That's dangerous. You might have the ability to control yourself and remain in control and say things the right way, but that becomes much more difficult when you're in that state. Do you experience frequent mood changes? Everybody has mood changes, but do I let those out to other people? As I mentioned in the beginning of this, consistency in behavior, I think, is one of the greatest compliments you can pay anyone, because that is so hard. But if you are a different person throughout the day, or somebody says something to you this morning, and then we've all worked with a person and probably been the person ourselves. I know I have, where in the morning you're in a great mood, something happens, in the afternoon you're in a bad mood, and you treat people differently. That means people now have to figure out who they are dealing with for you. And that's a red flag for self-management, right? We have the power to always manage ourselves without letting outward circumstances determine who we will be. One of my favorite comments, I heard this back when I was at Royal Hawaiian from the hotel manager, Jim Wiziger. He goes, are you really having a bad day, or did you just have a bad 5 minutes this morning and now you're milking it? And I thought, man, that's a powerful way to look at it. And, do you ever regret your actions? Another great question to ask yourself. If you have regret, that simply means in that moment, I didn't manage myself the way that I would like to, and I could have done better. Now, as we move into ways to enhance our self-management, they're all going to line up and make sense. We have to control that space between what happens and how we respond. And one of my I don't know if I call it a favorite book. It was certainly one of the most impactful books I've ever read. It was a tough read, just reading what happened. Was a guy from Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He survived Nazi Germany as a Jew. And one of the things he talked about is, the Nazi soldiers in that period would literally hit the Jewish people in the chest or the head with a gunpoint, trying to get a reaction so that they could justify shooting them. I mean, it's awful. And his quote, I'm going to read this so I get this correct. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I just made a real simple slide. I want to throw this up for you just so it's visual. This space defines our life, right? Now, he had bigger ramifications for his actions than hopefully any of us do. But actually, whatever we do, whatever little moment we have, right, we are sending messages about who we are and how we respond. And we really need to pay attention and manage that better in order to build the greatest relationships we want to have in life, to thrive ourselves. I know if I ever respond incorrectly in even one moment, in one email, I typically think about it for a long time after, and that brings me down, right? So I'm trying to work on never having that response to manage the right way. Some great enhancers, right, for self-management. First, anytime you feel yourself blowing up, leave the situation. And I know that's challenging at times. Maybe the other person is like instigating you for a response, but it might be simple as, hey, I've got to run use the restroom really quick, and I'll come back so we can finish this conversation. Get in that restroom, take some slow, deep breaths, breathe in slowly, breathe out. An 8 count in and an 8 count out is a great reference point. I always tell people, I one time had this kid come back and he was like, and I tried the breath technique, it didn't work. And I said, well, tell me what happened. He explained the situation. He's like, I walked outside and I was And I was like, okay, that's not breathing, that's hyperventilating. That's actually increasing heart rate. When we breathe slow, we infuse oxygen into our body. We actually reduce the speed at which our cells are moving. We cause ourselves to calm down. But bigger than that, we're taking time. People will often say count to 10 before you make a decision, or sleep on it. That's to give our brain time to move from this emotional state right at the top of our spinal cord into our frontal lobe, right? So we're looking at things differently. Another great technique is just to choose the relationship over your ego. Our egos get us in trouble, right? Especially in times like right now where we're living in close quarters. A lot of the just random conversations I have with people as they describe what happened, you can sense that it's just ego driven, right? On both sides. And if you just go, hey, you know what? Let's step back from this and just, I love you, you love me, and like, how do we have a calm conversation about this and move forward? One of my favorite quotes is, apologizing doesn't mean you think you're wrong. It means you respect the relationship more than your ego. And I think that apology statement right now is really, really important. If you have offended someone around you, a coworker, even on Zoom, right? It's tougher. We can't see responses. Maybe we say something. I'll be honest, guys, this is, I'm fearful of doing live right now because in that split moment, maybe something comes out the wrong way and then it's captured forever. If you have felt like you haven't said something the right way, you always have that power to go back and address it and let that person know where you were coming from in that moment and it wasn't exactly who you were and you're sorry. And I think that can typically move it back onto the right track unless you do it over and over and over. And if you do, jump into number 3. I love this method. Apply the HALT method before you make a decision. If you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, stop that decision-making process and question yourself before you do it. When we're hungry, we can make poor decisions. When we're angry, of course we know that. When we're lonely, maybe when we're lonely, we're gonna jump in and reach out to someone that maybe you've broken up with someone, right? And during this lonely period, maybe they really hurt you, and you go, no, you know what? I'm just gonna reach back out. Maybe that's not the right decision for you. How do you pause that? And if you're tired, and a great way to think about HALT is, what do I need to shift out of that emotional state in order to put myself in a place where I could make the right decisions? I joke about this, but if sometimes when people are hungry, you go, okay, so what do you need right now to get out of this anger state? And people go, I need food. And you go, okay, can you get some food? And they go, nope, too busy. It's like, well, we know the answer. Right now we just got to manage ourselves to get it. We could do those for each of that. So guys, that's self-awareness, self-management in a very quick nutshell. One of the quotes I love to use for self-management is whatever happens to us, right, is beyond our control. But we do have 100% of control of our response. And that's a great way to look at it. And our response, right, ties into social awareness, right, and reading other people. Einstein has a great quote. He said, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. And I think we're seeing this more today than ever before. It is difficult to truly understand and interpret other people because we're always looking at it through our own filter and our own lens. So as we move into social awareness, it's understanding everything that's going through my brain. Like, this is built up from years of conditioning inside me. Let me pause and listen to this person and hear their story and find out what's going on. And typically, I believe this, when we listen to another person and explore where their emotions may be coming from, there is always a reason they're responding the way they're, and for them, that reason is right. Whether you ultimately agree with their reasoning or not, for them it is right, and that can give us compassion and help us just slow and learn and process differently. I think it's critical today more than ever to take the time to just educate ourselves about the people around us, right? Your coworkers, your loved ones, your kids. Anytime something happens that doesn't make sense for you from their end, dive into it. So back to the doctor's office, some questions to ask yourself. Do you ever make assumptions or judgments of others? Which I truly believe every human being does. If we do that a lot, right, that's a great place to start to go, how do I start to address this more? Can you accurately read the emotions of others? Are you picking up on what's happening on their face? That's critical to be able to understand them and dive deeper. And do you know what motivates the ones around you, right? Do I understand them enough to know that, hey, this is what this person really needs. The 5 love languages is a great, simple concept to explore. Just out of 5 ways that this loved one next to me, how do they like to be loved, right? Is it words of affirmation? Is it touch? Is it gifts of service? Is it acts of kindness? Whatever that is, like diving deep into it. Because guys, we've been taught empathy. I feel pretty comfortable saying this. We've been taught it incorrectly our whole lives. And the reason I say that is you've all probably seen or heard some version of the golden rule, which is treat others the way that you want to be treated. Or the one I've been told my whole life is put yourself in the other person's shoes, which we could spend a whole day on this, is incorrect. Right? If I treat you the way I want to be treated, that assumes you are exactly like me. If I put myself in your shoes, that means I am observing your situation through my eyes. That is not leading me to greater awareness or understanding of what you're going through. And one of the jokes I always like to use for this as an example, because this is true. If you met me, this is a pre-COVID, but let's even go with COVID. Hopefully you got a mask, but if you met me and you said, Corey, great to meet you, and you gave me a big bear hug and picked me up, I would love that. Like, I love being picked up. I think it feels amazing. So let's say if I met anybody, any of you today, right, and I just ran and picked you up and said, great to see you, great to meet you, would you like that? You should actually give me a like if you like that or not like that. That'd be funny to see. Here's the deal. Based on the golden rule, you should like that, right? That should make you happy because it makes me happy. I'm treating you the way I want to be treated. And so we rapidly realize in a silly example like that, I don't get to treat you the way I want to be treated. I need to treat you the way that you want to be treated. And then we go, how would I know how you want to be treated? And the best place to start is to say, honestly, I don't know. What's this like for you? Some of the work that I've been doing with some of the organizations, just complementary work through COVID, is just saying, hey, through COVID and through the movement of Black Lives Matter, are you aware of all the emotions that your team is having and the people around you? And I'll give you a great example. I think it's unfortunate that sometimes we assume, right, if I don't have Black people in my organization, that everybody's fine. And we know that's not necessarily the case, right? It's diving deeper to understand how these things have impacted everybody. COVID is another huge one. Maybe I have this judgment assumption. If a person's been working through COVID, hey, okay, so they're okay. Not necessarily the case, right? We got to dive deep. So some great ways to enhance social awareness. First, master the art of reading clues, right? People are sending constant clues through the words that we use, through the tone that we say them in, and through all of our nonverbal communication. Looking for that, picking up on it, and when you perceive something that maybe doesn't feel the way that you expected them to look, diving in deep. What don't I know about this situation? And what's the question I could ask? A question like, how are you today? Probably won't give me the same amount of information as, hey, what challenges are you facing just at home right now with the ones around you? That might open up a whole new door of communication and thought. And ultimately, right, the most powerful way to develop social awareness is to try to not treat people the way that you want to be treated, but dive deeper and go, hey, how can I assist, help you, or what do you need in this situation? One of my favorite stories, there's a guy named Greg Dyke who ran BBC. This is about 20 years ago. And the story goes, when he took over that role, he went to every affiliate BBC was associated with, and he just asked 2 questions. What can I do to make your job more enjoyable as your new CEO of BBC? And what can I do to make the experience for our clients a better experience? And as the story goes, from those 2 things, he got so much information and changed the entire company and the organization. So just reaching out, right, is a great way to build that social awareness. And now we move into the last realm, relationship management. So if we have this enhanced understanding of ourselves and what's running through us and how the emotions that we're having in any moment might determine how we respond. And then we take that knowledge, right, and we apply that to how we do respond, and we choose the right action and the right behavior each time. And then through that process, we are looking at others and observing them and reading clues and diving deeper. Well, then maybe we can turn that into great communication, great inspiration around others, and just building great relationships. And I really truly believe being consistent in who we are every single day. Some great questions to ask yourself if you're back at the doctor's office and they're trying to determine, your relationships. Feedback. Do you take feedback well yourself? Do you give it to others the right way the first time? Feedback is the greatest gift in the world. We all know this inherently, but it's easy to forget. The person in your life who walks up and gives you tough feedback and actually says, hey, when you do this, it hurts people's feelings, it causes this, that's your best friend. It's your best friend. Most people will not have the courage to do that. That person is great. Be that person for other people, but the way you say it is critical. Another question to ask is, if there is conflict, do you engage in an open, honest conversation with that person? Burying conflict never helps, right? It never helps, and it's so easy to do. Throughout my life, I really have a buried conflict. I've said, it's just not worth addressing. I'm at a stage now where I realize, and a Joe Rogan quote that I love is, honest conflict has greater social value than dishonest harmony. And I try not to ever live in dishonest harmony. I try to have the conversation, because usually when I do, I learn where that person is coming from, and hopefully vice versa. And then the last question to ask is just, are you the same person every day? Do you have that consistency in your actions? That is critical, right, for building great relationships. And so our last kind of slide here today, everybody. Thank you. I hope you guys are hanging in here with me. Some ways to enhance relationship management. And obviously these are easy said. They require, I believe, a lot of work to actually make them come to life. But first, being consistent, being trustworthy, being the same person every day. I know who this person is. And look, if you're not that person that day, that's okay. But I'm aware that I can actually explain that. If I'm walking into work and I'm not the traditional Corey that you've come to know, maybe I'm able to say, hey, guys, I just want to let you know I'm in a bit of a tough emotional state right now. Whether I share or not share that state, that's an awareness that I've given that person to explain my consistency in behavior. When you're receiving feedback, right, hopefully you get it. If no one's giving you feedback, that's probably dangerous, that you might have set up an environment where they don't feel comfortable. But when someone comes up, if possible, take it in, say, hey, you know what, first of all, thank you for telling me. I appreciate that. Can if you don't understand it, if it doesn't make sense, dive deeper into it. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and where you perceive that, or why you believe that? And then accept it, apply what you can, thank the person at the end. That will encourage them to give you more feedback. And this last one is a fun one, but just become a master of small compliments. And what I mean by that is, when we look at people to see what we like about that person, as opposed to what I think our brains do. Psychologists, I've seen a few studies that report 80 to 85% of our natural thought lies below our subconscious. That's pretty scary, but we have the power to shift that. So guys, that is emotional intelligence in a nutshell. If you would like to join me in the next realm of this, I've got as I mentioned, an intensive program kicking off next week. Starts June 30th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. The signups are on Eventbrite, so please just go up to look up Excelling with Emotional Intelligence, or the link is in my Instagram bio. If you're watching this on Facebook, look at my last post. You'll see the sign up there. You can search it on Eventbrite. I would love to have you join. All these things we talked about very rapidly today, we're going to dive deep in. It's 8 hours of actual Zoom time, but there's going to be a lot more activities that you'll be doing in the intermix between the weeks. We're going to be looking at case studies. We're going to be diving in to help you understand to understand how you process, to actually analyze it and assess it, and then to boil that into the others around you and how you interact and engage with them, and maybe what are some of those blind spots that we can take off about you, and maybe about a lack of understanding of someone else, and ultimately to walk out of that program with a action plan for you to hit the key steps that you want to develop for yourself. So I've got 35 seconds remaining on this live, everybody. I just want to thank all of you for joining and being with me today. You've given me a gift of your time, which is a huge gift. I hope you got some value out of this, and I hope if you want to continue, either message me directly. We can talk more about what the program is, or just if you want to sign up, that's great, and I'll be in touch. But I want to send love out to you all. These are tough times. again, let's kick it back to the beginning. Our feelings and our emotions drive who we are. So I'm going to end it here, guys. It says I got 5 seconds remaining. Mahalo nui loa. Thank you so much, and I'll see you later. Bye, guys.